That's the thing, Hocking Hills has almost as many visitors a year as Yellowstone National Park.
Really?
And so there's, like, especially if you're here on the weekends, the parks are just crowded.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many people, and maybe some people don't mind that, but for me, that's like a turn off. I think that's one of the really cool things that we can offer people is, you know what, you don't have to leave at all. You can just stay here and you can hike around our property, and it'll feel very similar to any of the nature preserves around here.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Keys to the Commonwealth. I'm super excited this week as I am not joined, but I am in fact joining Bryant here at some of his development properties that he has in the Hocking Hills, Ohio. Some people may be familiar with that, some people may not be familiar with that. So without any further ado, Brian, thanks for having me on the show, having me to your place for the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show.
So this is the first time doing it outside of our normal studio setup, so obviously a little remote in some respects here, but as you all can see, if you're not already familiar with this, we are currently filming this in what is called, what we call it, the cave?
Dunlap Hollow Cave.
Dunlap Hollow Cave, and it speaks for itself. It is an Airbnb short-term rental that is literally built into a cave. So we're going to learn a lot more about that. Some of Brian's passion projects that he has here on the site. We have multiple cabins or other short-term rentals here on the site and so forth. So Brian, appreciate you coming on. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what kind of got you into this development that you've got going on here.
Absolutely. I've always loved designing and building stuff since I was a young kid. And I went to college for mechanical engineering.
That helps, right? And
it doesn't hurt.
Okay.
I went to college for mechanical engineering, and then I ended up working a research engineering job for 3 years after I got my master's, actually. And I was just really feeling burnt out with a desk job and doing the same thing over and over again. I was doing kind of like fundamental research, so it was, I guess there wasn't a ton of cool results that we were seeing. It was all like very slow type of work. I'm sure it seems like you probably got a creative aspect to you, and sure that was probably not a part of what that was then. Well, actually I was able to use my creativity quite a bit in that job compared to a lot of other engineering jobs probably, but that was what really set me over the edge, thinking like, you know what, I am probably not going to find an engineering job that I like better than this, and I still don't like it. So that was when I was like, you know what, it's time to start thinking creatively about something that I can use my skills and something that would bring our family a good amount of income. Independence and all that. Which is a lot what our podcast is about, just finding ways of more independence, wealth. And so something that I would enjoy and would be good for our family. So Hocking Hills, though, for those that are not familiar with this area, it's a very, you think Ohio, you don't normally think of this kind of bit of a mountainous kind of rocky scenario, which I'm very familiar with being in Kentucky side of things. So explain what Hocking Hills is, or more or less what well, Hocking Hills is, I think, often called like the gem forest of Ohio. Like it's, you just 10 miles away, we're in flat to rolling fields, and then this area has a lot of cool rock outcroppings. Like you'll see that even driving down the road, you'll see cliffs and really cool sandstone everywhere. It's actually called blackhand sandstone is the type of rock it is. And so were you always coming here as a kid or anything like that? Yeah, growing up, like we would be here. Because you reside in Columbus. Yes, area, and I grew up in that area as well, and we'd come here probably a couple times a year just to go hiking, and I've always really loved the area. And so, it's a very eclectic area, like I said, and I know even from Kentucky we love going down to this area, as the Red River Gorge area, like we're kind of accustomed to, and so a lot of similar vibes to that for sure. Absolutely. So you're very familiar with the area. So then, what kind of got you on this? How were you able to kind of acquire this area of land or so forth? So once we decided, you know what, I'm going to stop doing engineering eventually. We got to figure out what we're going to do. We had a couple other ideas that we never acted on, but when we thought of vacation rentals, we had seen a number of kind of cutting edge rentals down here in Hocking Hills already. And we thought, you know what, that would be really fun for me. That'd be like a dream job.
Sure.
And the likelihood of us being able to bring in good income and for this business to succeed is pretty high. I mean, and if not, we can always sell real estate, right?
Right.
It's a pretty safe type of thing to start. And so we started looking for land, and we were thinking, you know, it's probably going to take, you know, a year or two to find a good piece of land. But actually, within the first week of looking, this property came up,
really?
Which is pretty incredible. Actually, it was a lot of what we feel very blessed to, you know, for it to have happened that quickly.
So much land do you have on the property?
This is 34.5 acres.
34.5 acres.
Yeah,
Okay.
which is about what we were looking for when we started. This land was a lot more expensive though than we were thinking, and at the time, it was expensive. It was probably per acre. It was one of the most expensive pieces of land that's that size that has ever sold, but this piece of property is just amazing. We have a lot of hiking trails here on site. We have a waterfall that's 80 feet tall.
Yeah.
We have a couple other waterfalls. We have like a really cool rock outcropping.
So if somebody comes here, they don't even have to go out and do anything else. They could just stay on property.
And see, that's the thing. Hocking Hills has almost as many visitors a year as Yellowstone National Park.
Really?
And so there's like, especially if you're here on the weekends, like the parks are just crowded.
Yeah.
Like there's so many people, and maybe some people don't mind that, but for me, that's like a turnoff.
You're right.
Like I came here to be alone in nature, and so I think that's one of the really cool things that we can offer people is, you know what, you don't have to leave at all. You can just stay here and you can hike around our property, and it'll feel very similar to any of the nature preserves around here.
So not having been a real estate investor prior to taking on something like this, probably having at least few of your young children at that time, and you're like, you know, we're gonna try something a little bit crazy, but you know, having confidence in yourself and just kind of your faith, and then where you were headed and what you were dreaming. So you got the property. What's the stage then, as far as it usually just kind of finding the property, buying the property, typically from what I hear, and then figuring out more or less the building aspect with the banks or different things like that, or was it all privately financed in that sense?
Yeah.
Kind of an overview.
Right. So we were pretty fortunate. We had some private investors that were willing to invest what we needed.
Yep.
We didn't even have enough for the down payment for this property. The land itself, it was over $100,000.
Yeah.
Just the down payment.
Yeah.
And so we did a bank loan for vacant land.
Okay.
But we had family help us out with
That's great.
with the down payment, which was amazing. And then from there, Was
there a lot of trying to present the idea in a way that didn't sound a little bit too crazy to the family?
There was definitely a very thought out plan in writing.
Right. But that's good though. You don't want to go to any plan, even with my real estate journey and stuff like that. Knowing your numbers, knowing a plan, here's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
If you don't have that or don't already know that, then you're setting yourself up for failure a lot of times. And so I know even for me, it was a year-long process of really learning numbers, researching property, different types of properties and so forth. Wanted to go STR at the beginning. I'm pretty thankful and blessed that door did not open at that point in time, but I'm hoping to do something obviously down the road, and we went more long-term rental. But yeah, so got the land, got a bank loan for part of it.
And then from there, the mortgage payments were like almost what my paycheck was, it seemed like.
Yeah.
And so we're like, well, we got to act fast on this. There was a little cottage built in 1920, completely run down and infested by raccoons, and no plumbing, anything like that. We had that place renovated. I couldn't do it myself because I was still working at the time.
Sure.
We had that place renovated right away, and within, I think, 4 months of closing on the property, we were hosting our first guests.
Yep.
And from the time we opened that, we were able to always make that rental income was enough to make all our mortgage payments and expenses.
Yeah.
And so we felt like we were in the clear from that point.
So within that, I'm sure that presented a lot. Do you all self-manage all the properties as far as that goes, or do you have?
We do not do any of the cleanings.
Sure.
But other than that, we manage everything. Yes.
Okay. So you jumped right in, learning all the ins and outs of how to scheduling, the things that guests nag about, I'm sure, or ask about, and those things right off the bat. So you kind of got that as a stepping foot into it, everything, and then you had kind of mentioned that, I think, how quickly in that process was the idea of like, hey, I think we could do something in this cave down the road. Obviously, this was number 3 on the list of the 3 property, or 3 units right now on the property.
Yeah.
Was that kind of the idea always to have something in this cave?
Well, it wasn't always the idea.
Okay.
Believe it or not, when we bought the land, we didn't know it existed.
Okay.
We're pretty close to the road, and so you'd think we would have seen the cave here, but it didn't look quite like this. There was a big pile of fill in front of it, and there were trees, a lot of dead trees actually, that were like obstructing the view. So, and this isn't a part of our land that we've like explored that much at that time. But what happened was we had the idea, you know what, that'd be so cool to put a rental in a cave. Like that would be insane. I gotta ask,
are there others in the U.S. or something like that?
There are others in the U.S., but not anywhere near here.
Okay.
There's a pretty cool one in Missouri, actually.
Okay.
Anyway, so we have a lot of other caves on our property, but most of them are pretty far from the road, and access would have been really difficult. And so I got to thinking, you know what? We haven't explored everything completely. Let's go look around and see if we find something that's better suited. And so that's when we found this cave, and and it was really a pretty perfect scenario for us.
Was your wife with you at the time doing it, or was it a phone call live, hey, what if we did this type of a thing, or you were already thinking about the cave aspect?
We had talked about the cave aspect quite a bit beforehand.
Didn't know about this specific one.
Okay. And she knew I was looking around.
Okay. I was gonna say, if I called my wife and say, hey, let me spring this on you, I know I would have had a little explaining to do.
Yeah.
So you found that, but then you had worked on the A-frame. Now your all's A-frame, like I told you, was one of those things that really got me into the idea for my creativity aspect that I have within real estate of wanting to potentially do similar things like you're doing in different parts of the state of Kentucky where I live, obviously. But talk to me a little bit about the A-frame then that you all originally built, I guess as the first
new build.
First new build that you all did.
Yeah, so once we had that cottage renovated, we were looking to see what we're going to build next.
Right.
And A-frames have just always been a love of mine. I think they're incredibly simplistic, but they're beautiful.
Made a huge comeback from this more modern, elegant way that they've been done from previous decades.
Yeah, and our A-frame, we honestly pulled from like hundreds of different designs that we found. We looked at so many A-frames online, trying to like see what aspects we liked, and how we could incorporate those. And there's some things that are completely original, like the triangular windows on the front facade.
Yeah, that's the big staple.
Yeah, we found some designs that we liked, and we tried to put it all together, and the Dunlap Hollow A-frame is what we ended up with.
So as far as that goes, I mean, did you design that whole thing then based upon all those? And you have that skill set as far as being able to do your own designs from start and finish?
Yeah.
Kind of thing?
I'm not an architect or a licensed architect, but for the A-frame and for the cave, I did all the drawings, and then I'd hand that to somebody to draft up. Yeah. And so you guys have, I assume, more of an interior decorator aspect as well that kind of put their touch on it, or did you guys kind of design or have an idea of what you kind of were looking at and go from there? Yeah, I'm not very skilled in interior decor. My wife is pretty good at it, and actually A-frame and cave, really, she is the brain behind like, this is what I want to see. But then our sister-in-law, she just started a design business, and she's the one who really made it happen. So she kind of took Amy's dreams and like put it into action.
So both of you kind of like that idea. We together, both of you kind of conceptualized the whole thing, really kind of painted a rough picture of a rough picture but accurate picture of what you kind of wanted it to look like, and they were able to kind of take it from there. So how long was that process with the A-frame, start to finich, then before that was off the ground?
Yeah, so
you were still working at this time too?
No, I was not. So actually, it was weird. I quit my job during the pandemic. So I never saw my boss,
to tell him.
Well, I mean, virtually.
In person,
It was pretty weird. But I quit where I was working just right in time to start building the A-frame, and that was intentional. I think we've been I've done other projects before, and while I was working a full-time job, and it's just not for us.
No.
It doesn't work well. So we've been really intentional in this whole business in trying to make sure it's not all-consuming.
Yeah. Which anything can be easily.
Anything can be.
Do that.
Yeah.
And as you know, with young kids like I have myself, it's like the days are long, but the years are very short in that sense, and trying to maximize that in ways that don't eat our time up, which it can easily be done with, like I said, as you know, with anything. So so that process then?
8 months.
8 months, okay.
From start to finish of the build process. From groundbreaking to when we're starting to rent.
Kind of acting as a GC then to kind of hire out different portions of it.
Yeah, for the A-frame, I did the majority of the work myself.
Yeah.
But I also hired out some things, and it's pretty easy to build something when you're doing it. When you're there every day and you're doing it mostly yourself, and then you hire out what you don't want to do.
Yeah.
I had talked to a lot of my friends that are contractors, and they're like, it's just a pain to like get people to do stuff on time and stuff.
Oh, I totally understand that. And so then, obviously, we're sitting here in the cave, and this has been open for what, 6 months, a year?
It's been open since mid-November, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just under 6 months. And for those that may have not seen it or looked at it, it's already booked out, I think, pretty much a year plus more solid, or I believe, almost to that point, right?
Yeah, we're booked solid halfway through 2024 right now.
Which is incredible. And I want to talk about that a little bit as far as short-term rentals that are unique in that and that draw. But talk to me about some of the challenges then, just in a cave scenario. Obviously, we're dealing with moisture and everything else like that. Water runoff in some respects. What's going? What was involved with that? Did you have to get permits pulled? I mean, I can't even imagine trying to get some of these. Even in the counties in Kentucky, the small counties, trying to get them to do anything from that standpoint is like pulling teeth. I can't imagine. Talk to me about some of the things, the challenges there, or some of the things you didn't even see or foreseeing being an issue that maybe were. Yeah,
I would say the two largest challenges were permitting and moisture. Makes sense. Permitting, the process just took a while. We actually, here in Hocking County, they don't have a building department, and so you go through the state. So this is permitted through the state of Ohio, and it's considered a commercial property because it's a rental.
Was it already zoned, or do you have to rezone it?
Just the building itself.
So you didn't have to worry about zoning
I didn't
at all?
have to worry about zoning, no. And honestly, the building department, state department was pretty good to work with. We did have to get several different variances, as you may imagine. This is just very non-standard. But they worked with us well. We had to find a structural engineer that was willing to sign off on it. That was kind of a big deal.
I didn't even think about that part.
We had to have a geologist look at it. And say that the structure itself is sound.
We're not interfering with any bats and things of that kind of thing, right?
He didn't look at bats, but we were in here pretty extensively.
It's not a super deep kind of
with bats or anything.
Obviously.
It's actually not technically a cave. It's a rock shelter. But we call it a cave because
to anybody else,
it looks like a cave
to us. And so the moisture aspect, I know you constantly have to be pumping moisture out, right? So how did that kind of work?
So we have rock all around us. We have exposed ceiling. There's moisture in the ground, and there's really no way to trap the water out. And so we have to let it in, and then we have to deal with the moisture so that we are in a livable space. And going into the project, we thought, I talked to some HVAC folks, and I've worked with them throughout the whole project, and they said, well, this is our biggest dehumidifier. I think this might do the trick. We put that in, and it was not doing the trick.
Oh no!
That thing can remove from 10 to 20 gallons of water a day. And so we ended up installing 4 of those units.
Oh my goodness!
And that has been able to take care of the moisture pretty well.
Wow.
So on a given day, I mean, right now we're sitting around 50% in here, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
And that's about where we're targeting to be. And we're probably removing 20 gallons a day of water. And it's, it's just coming out of the rock everywhere.
Yeah.
We do have.
If it wasn't doing that, it'd be dripping in essence.
Yeah, not everywhere, but there's plenty of areas that while we were building before we had it climate controlled that were dripping. In fact, right here, right over top the kitchen sink, it would be a pretty nice dripping going on there. Which we thought, you know what, if it still does, we'll maybe try to just get it to drip right into the sink or something.
See, and that's the thing about being creative and building your own place is you can do stuff like that. You're like, okay, let's adapt, let's figure this out, and change it this way.
Yeah, thankfully most of those spots all dried up as soon as we got it dry in here. There's still some areas over in the one bedroom that do drip.
Yeah.
They don't drip all year round. In the fall when we opened, it was dry, but this has been a pretty wet winter for us. And
I'm sure people staying in a cave, if they see a drip, they're not like, calling you like, oh my goodness.
Your roof's leaking.
I want a refund because there was a drop of water from a cave I stayed in.
Yeah. Well, and that's been kind of ongoing project is dealing with the water that comes out of that bedroom and figuring out how to catch it and drain it away so that it doesn't get on the floor.
Yeah. That's unbelievable, man. I mean, it really is something to behold. I'm extremely thankful that you let me even inside the place to even do this and talk to you about it. Because as far as though, real quick, the marketing aspect of this, I mean, how big has social media been as far as being able to, because you guys don't even book on Airbnb or any of those things, I believe, anymore, right? You're all direct bookings and so forth.
Yeah.
So how impactful has that been in a big, I'm sure in a big way, but for you all?
Yeah. It's very impactful. It's a little bit hard to gauge exactly how impactful, just because we're booking out pretty well, even before we started hiring out our own social media. Yeah. Which we do now. We don't do it ourselves.
Okay.
For the cave, we don't book on Airbnb at all. Right. I think we have it listed, but we have it blocked. Yeah. Like for 6 months or so no one could ever access a day. It certainly makes a huge difference. I know even there are certain influencers early on in our business had like Levi Kelly did a video of the A-frame. Yeah. And I think before that video was out, we had all our weekends already booked for the year. Okay. But from your own posting and stuff? From our own stuff, yeah. Yeah. But within 2 weeks of that video coming out, we had all the weekdays booked, which are a lot harder to book. Yeah. So I know that there's direct correlation with stuff like that, stuff that goes viral. Yeah.
And I've always talked to my business partner and other people about that aspect of like, there's one thing with short-term rental where it's more of a convenience, it's a nice place, you're traveling somewhere. But there's also something to it in the sense of like, almost like the field of dreams, if you build it, they will come scenario, in the sense of like, if you build something so unique, I mean, people are just going to be drawn to wanting to partake in that experience side of things, that sometimes going a little bit above and beyond what someone might typically do probably pays off in a big way down the road.
Yeah. Well, and there's also a security factor because there's a lot of cabins in Hocking Hills area. Yeah. Yeah. There's, I don't know, I think there's probably close to 3,000 now. Okay. And, if for some reason, the market gets oversaturated, or if there's a recession or something like that, people aren't gonna want to come as much as they do now. And our goal is to feel safe in this sense that, if maybe there's less people coming here and maybe we have to lower our prices a little bit. Yeah. But people probably want to come here more than a lot of the other cabins.
Exactly. And if I see anything from the pandemic anything where maybe you can't travel internationally, or you start working for more, there's people that would typically be traveling or spending a lot more money outside of the U.S. or something like that, where they're now more willing to kind of find some place more local type of scenario in those situations like that. God forbid that happens again, obviously in that sense. But I mean, I think you're very well protected from that standpoint.
Yeah. Well, actually, COVID was our best business ever. Yeah. Right. Hocking Hills, everyone in Hocking Hills did very well during COVID. Yeah. That's where everyone vacationed.
Did it really put it more on the map than it ever was before, or was it just more, amplified from what it in a way, as far as when you say that with COVID. I mean, how popular was it already compared to what it is now?
I don't think COVID is what made Hocking Hills popular. I think we just had a lot of people come during COVID because they weren't going to the beach anymore.
Yeah.
Or they weren't going on their big vacation that they had planned. They're going to settle for driving an hour away.
And then they start wanting to have family experiences like you did, coming back maybe a few times.
Yeah.
Once a year or
and
something like
that could be. I think in the past 5 to 10 years, there's been a big boom in tourism here.
Yeah.
In general, I don't think that necessarily correlates with COVID, but
that could be our generation, I think, in some respects, wanting to have more experiences and get outdoors and see, just the world and creation a whole lot more for our eyes than maybe we did as kids or our parents' generation did in some respects. I mean, maybe I'm incorrect with that. But I definitely feel like that is a little bit more of a draw for our generation.
I think that's true, and I think, but I think social media probably has a part in this too.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of new stuff here, and people are hearing about it.
Yeah.
And they're finding that it's only an hour away from Columbus, Ohio. So,
right. So about an hour southeast of Columbus and 2 hours, 2.5 from northeast from Cincinnati, or pretty much straight east almost. Yeah. Some respects right there. As we wrap up, what's your favorite part of the cabin, or the cave cabin? There?
Yeah.
Outside of it being a cave, obviously.
I think my favorite part's this bookshelf right over here.
Yeah, and we'll definitely take a look at the bookshelf. I was going to ask you, who had the inspiration for the arches? Yeah. So there's an arch theme going on over top of the oven and the bookshelves and so forth. So.
That is all credit is due to my wife.
Okay.
Who thought of this wonderful Gothic arch. And I said, yeah, we can do it. Not thinking through we have to build this somehow.
Right.
Yeah, we actually had all those moldings custom made. But it was not cheap.
I'm sure it wasn't. If anybody wants to kind of follow along on social media, or maybe look at finding a booking in 2024 at this point or beyond, where can they find that?
Yeah, you can go to our website, dunlaphollow.com. Or you can follow us on social media. Dunlap Hollow Cabins is our handle. And
from our conversation, you've got a few others maybe down the road that you might be working on the property.
Yeah, we don't have concrete plans at this point.
Do you have a goal as far as quantity, maybe, in some respects?
We are not sure on quantity either.
Okay.
But we do have space to build more.
Yeah.
And
you have the luxury of being able to take your time now at the same point.
We have the luxury of being able to take our time, and we have several different ideas that we're trying to think about which one is the best.
Okay.
And
looking forward to it.
Yeah, we'll probably see something in the next 2 years or so.
Okay.
But
very cool.
Taking a little break right now.
Well, Brian, again, appreciate your time and letting me kind of bombard you with emails and so forth to kind of opening up your space for this. And I appreciate sharing your passion and project with this. And everybody, check us back next week on another episode of the Keys to the Commonwealth. Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.